Hello, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong, Week in Review. This show was recorded on April 25, 2023. Here are the major topics we'll touch on today. The world remembers the Armenian Genocide, while Artsakh is under the threat of a genocide itself. Azerbaijan tightens the Stranglehold over Artsakh by unilaterally establishing a so-called checkpoint on the Hakkari Bridge, while giving Artsakh Armenians an ultimatum to either adopt Azerbaijani citizenship or leave. Pashinyan gives his most explicit statement to date that Armenia recognizes the Soviet borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, but it's the fault of the formers, of course. Azerbaijan's tensions with Iran continue to heat up with the visit of the Israeli foreign minister and new defense agreements. To talk about these issues, we have with us Arthur G. Martirosyan, who is a senior consultant with CM Partners. In 1994, after graduating from Yale University, he joined Conflict Management Group and Harvard Negotiation Project, and has since worked on conflicts in the former Soviet Union, the Middle East, the Balkans, Africa, and Latin America. Hello, Arthur, and welcome back to our show.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Good to have you back, Arthur.
Thank you.
Arthur, it's April 25 when we're recording this, and this year marks the 108th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, which is commemorated on April 24. Leading up to this year's commemorations last week in the parliament, Pashinyan made some statements that reminded me about this regime's policy with regard to Armenian genocide. Specifically, he mentioned that Armenians don't have enough pictures of Mount Aragat, but have pictures of Ararat, alluding to the fact, or in his mind at least, that Armenians do not cherish what they have and yearn for things they don't have and cause problems with our quote-unquote neighbors. Of course, we also can't forget that prior to the 2021 elections, Pashinyan was talking about the fact that Armenians essentially have enemies because we also perceive our neighbors as enemies, and we need to not perceive them as enemies, etc., in order to have peace with them, etc., etc. On the international front, we actually saw several major countries, including the US, repeating the words genocide using the magic G word. I mean, frankly, I would care about this 5 years ago. It would be, I would have a sense of great accomplishment as a member of the Armenian community, but it seems surreal to see that with Artsakh under a complete blockade, that we are hearing some empty statements about, the genocide without any mention of Artsakh, and while the United States is still supplying arms to Azerbaijan. So I wanted to ask what you think about this year's April 24. What impressions do you have, and anything you can share with us?
Well, I think we need to look at the big picture first, kind of zoom out before we zoom in. And if you zoom out, you can see that the issue of the genocide or history and our memory, collective memory, is the foundation of the Armenian identity. I would not want to go whether that's more so for diasporans or for Armenians here in Armenia. It's essentially one of the cornerstones of the identity. And, well, I mean, obviously for Armenians in diaspora who've been keeping their identity in a much more difficult circumstances of potential assimilation and whatnot than in Armenia, this issue is more sensitive even than for Armenians who live in Armenia and take their identity for granted, right? You are born here, you are born into an environment where everybody speaks Armenian, and nothing seems to threaten your identity. In any event, from the negotiation perspective, if we look at it, it's one of the issues that fundamentally unites the nation. And when I say nation, I do not mean just Armenians in Armenia in classical nation state interpretation of the term, but as a nation that has been created as a consequence of that genocide too. So diasporans too are part of this nation. So that's a unifying factor, one. Number two, an important one, is that Armenia has found itself in an intractable, seemingly, conflict with both Turkey and Azerbaijan. And part of that conflict is over the past, right? I mean, we need to somehow find a way to negotiate with them on what happened and how we're going forward. So if it's an intractable conflict, normally either it continues for a long time until one of the sides changes its position. Either Turkey recognizes the genocide, and then it leads to some kind of remedy and reconciliation in that order, or Armenia changes something in its position that would allow somehow to negotiate a way out of that conflict. Pashinyan and his clique have chosen the second path. They essentially, if you read carefully what he has to say, he repeats the thesis of the Turkish denial propaganda for years and years. That it sounds a very genuine reflection, right, on the events of 108 years ago, when you ask the question, okay, so how did we get there? Why did it happen? And you are starting from yourself and saying, so what did we do to allow that to happen? It's a good question. But the way Pashinyan is answering that question is kind of putting the blame on the victim. And it's kind of saying, oh, we collectively, and who is that we? Is that Grigor Zorab? Is that Siamanto? Is that my grandparents who were left orphaned and observed how their families were burned alive? Who is the we? Who is the we who is to be blamed? In the Turkish propaganda narrative, Armenians were to be blamed for what happened. They were punished for their behavior. And essentially, Pashinyan is trying now to fundamentally change the paradigm and say, yes, we have to recognize that we had our share of blame too. Okay, Turkey was probably is to be blamed. And he needs that to negotiate other things with Turkey, because Turkey rejects any negotiation, puts preconditions to negotiate with Armenians some kind of rapprochement or modus vivendi. The second issue is obviously Artsakh. The third issue is obviously Artsakh, because that is a precondition in the Turkish negotiations with the Armenian side. And here too, the Armenian side, and that is Pashinyan, is ready to concede everything. Give everything. No longer need to negotiate for Artsakh. Armenia doesn't. It's the population of Artsakh that needs to go back in time, not even to 1988. Start from scratch and negotiate your self-determination rights with the authoritarian regime of Azerbaijan. And why is he doing that? I've been asking that myself. So why is he doing that? In part, the explanation is ideological, because he's from the same milieu that created this concept, Liparitians, Levon-Petrosians, or we need to accommodate the Turks. We are in this region, and our problems stem just because we are too pro-Russian, or we are not really accommodating the Turks. And the other and even more important explanation of why he's doing that, he is unable to negotiate internally with the Armenian nation at large. He understands that having taken that stance, it's untenable. It's impossible to come to a consensus with the nation at large. Therefore, he here has to tell the Armenians here that, look, we need to change our interpretation of history. We need to change the way we see the Turkish side. And here too, he's ready to go to concessions. And those concessions are made just to keep him in power. That's the only thing that this clique is concerned about. So they're ready to go to any extreme in interpretation. As I said, getting very close to the Turkish revisionist interpretation of history, where the victim is blamed for what happened.
And in fact, he seems to have been repeating the threats of the deniers as well. Basically, he said, like, the more we delay this, reconciliation, or
yes,
the bigger we will get hit on our head. But we'll talk more about that. Asbed, I wanted to ask you. You are a pure diaspora, a pure byproduct of the Armenian genocide. What are your thoughts as you on this April 24th?
A lot simpler than Arthur's explanation of how the negotiation process is thinking. I'm looking at diaspora communities. We covered it on Groong that everybody has their local community events, and they are proceeding with that. They are keeping the flame alive, and the diaspora cannot negotiate away the problems of the genocide. So that is continuing happening. I asked you a little bit before the show as well what was going on in Hayastan, if the processions to Dzizernagapert are going on. You said they are. So the country is definitely keeping the flame alive. The diaspora is keeping the flame alive. My main issue is that there's a deep division that has happened in the last few years between the Republic and the diaspora, and that is, and I put a lot of the blockage at the offices that have been established. For example, the High Commissioner's office, the embassy in DC, the embassy in Moscow. These are extremely inert offices at present that are not serving anything with trying to bring the communities together. That's my main concern.
In the interest of time, let's go to our other, I guess, not as happy news, but this news that we need to talk about in terms of what's happening in the region.
Yeah, after weeks of fears of further escalation in the blockade of Artsakh on Saturday, on the eve of April 24th, these commemorations for the 108th anniversary, Azerbaijan officially and finally made its move. They transported equipment and manpower to the bridge on the Hagari River that is the only way in and out of Artsakh in order to build a checkpoint, something that is in direct contravention, of course, of the November 9-10, 2020 statement, which guarantees free passage across the Pertsor-Lachin corridor. So the Azerbaijanis are setting up their checkpoint smack in front of a big Russian peacekeeper base and observation point. The Russian Ministry of Defense officially claimed that Azerbaijan made the move unilaterally and in an uncoordinated manner. I don't know if this means that all the previous ones had been coordinated with them, but, Anyway, this news, unfortunately, wasn't a surprise to almost anyone. In the days leading up to their latest actions, Azerbaijani propaganda spread fake news that Armenian military forces, supported by Russian peacekeepers, no less, were transporting arms to Artsakh. And at the end of March, Azerbaijanis had made further encroachments into the Armenian side of the border, establishing control of important heights that overlooked the road to the bridge. A couple of weeks ago, on April 6, Naira Melikyan, mother of fallen hero Haig Melikyan, reported to us that she was prevented from reaching the same bridge by Armenian border guards amidst claims that Azerbaijanis were planning to install posts or checkpoints. You can check out that episode of her report to us. We're going to put the link in the show notes. So the question, Arthur, were you surprised? Kind of a silly question, I guess. Were you surprised about this stuff happening? And what do these latest moves by Azerbaijan achieve?
I was surprised that it came this late. From 2020, the end of the war, I've been giving interviews to the Armenian media left and right, and I was telling them, be prepared for very bad news. And the bad news was Aliyev had under his control all possible levers to put pressure on Artsakh, including roads, communication, including the water, electricity, gas, you name it. So he controls everything. He has all the leverage he needs to get to his goal. And we know what his goal is. He hasn't made any secret of his goal. It's essentially to cleanse Artsakh, but to do it in such a way that he avoids the pressure from the international community or major players. That's his goal. Yeah. And he's getting there. He's using all the means at his disposal, and roads are one to do that. So the road was closed, but it was obvious that it was closed for a certain for certain goals. First is to put pressure on the Armenians of Artsakh, right, to make the life unbearable for them. Then in negotiations with Armenia and mediators, make the claim that this is now Azerbaijani territory, and even Armenia recognizes that this is my territory, and therefore my demand that there be checkpoint on that road for security and other reasons is quite legitimate. It's my sovereign territory. And moreover, by the agreement of the 9th of November, 2020, with where Pashinyan put his signature, he promised that there would be an open communication to Nakhichevan. Well, the word corridor is not there, but essentially it's about a corridor, because it was supposed to be manned by the Russian border guards, FSB. Okay, so what Aliyev can say now to those who want to put pressure on him is that, wait a second, I built the road as I promised. This is a road on my territory, and you are telling me that I cannot check the security. So you're telling me that this is a corridor on my territory. I want reciprocal move from the Armenian side. I want a reciprocal move from the Armenian side. Right. I mean, does it make sense? I mean, we can be very angry with what he's doing, but we have allowed him to do that. I can say that even worse consequences are ahead from the stance that Pashinyan has taken. If you are recognizing this as Azerbaijani territory, I'm putting myself now in the shoes of Aliyev, as any negotiator should do, right? This is not to sympathize with him, but to understand how the man may be thinking. If I'm Aliyev, my next move will be, and he already is making in the media that move, or indicating that move, is what are your passports doing on my territory, Armenia? Why are you issuing your passports? And I think in one of our conversations before, I said that that's where it's going.
Right.
The question is not what Aliyev is doing. The question is, what are we doing or not doing that allows him to do that? And that's the same question that we need to be asking about 1915. If we think that the international community is going to come and save Artsakh Armenians, we're making the same mistake that some of our leaders made in 1915. Mm-hmm. If we think that Aliyev is not going to use all the means he has to achieve his goal and the agenda of de-Armenianizing Artsakh, we are dead wrong. That's where it's going. And unfortunately, the powers that be in Armenia are doing everything to make that possible.
Arthur, the Armenian MFA again appealed to the Russians to unblock the corridor, claiming it is their responsibility. And also the Pashinyan government said that they would apply to the ICJ. But we already have a decision from the ICJ that is, basically ripped up by Aliyev and used as toilet paper. Almost all the major global and regional power expressed their sort of concern, in quotes, and some even made calls for Azerbaijan to cease and desist from provocations, but nothing more than that. If anything, the U.S. ambassador to Armenia noted again this week that no sanctions are being concerned against Azerbaijan. Right. So, it's one thing, I guess, to, at least for me still, maybe I'm too naive, but it's one thing to think that, okay, well, this can be a protracted conflict, and there's some negotiation going on, but we're now at the precipice of a point of no return, as some claim. And Artsakh is at a really sort of at the edge of being ethnically cleansed. Could the role of the international or regional powers change when it's this serious? We have, I think you answered it already, but I'm asking because we have mentioned repeatedly that Azerbaijan is an important player for everyone due to its role as an energy corridor, and that's understood. But is the international community truly powerless to prevent Azerbaijan from blatantly transgressing on its obligations with complete impunity, or do they simply not want to because the interests of all these major powers are orthogonal to Armenia's national interests? How much hope can we put in any international effort to help Armenia?
Well, let me start by a very stark observation that is, I would say, even outdated, and that is, there is no such thing as international community. There is no international community when the world order is collapsing and all its institutions, even in the best days of those institutions, they were not able to enforce some of the resolutions. How many resolutions there have been about Israel-Palestine? How many have been implemented? Why not? Why were they not implemented? And any international relations expert should be asking that question, because there were powers, was superpower, one of the superpowers, would not allow that, would veto or would not allow that to be implemented, right? So it means that the international politics is governed by interests, not by declarations of values, the blah, blah, blah about the conventions on protecting human rights and whatnot. It's governed by interests. And when the world order is collapsing, the order that was in place since 1945, Yalta and then Potsdam, when that world order is collapsing, it's a very egotistical process of each major power, each state fighting for their existential interests, all right? And anything goes in that situation. That's where we are. If we do not understand where the world is, it's almost similar to 1914, right? The world order collapses, and there is a world war. Now, I mean, is this a world war? I mean, some would say, no, it doesn't resemble 1914 or 1939 or whatever. But it is essentially that kind of a situation. And if you are in that kind of a situation, when those institutions are not working, and we sit and just wait, another ICJ resolution, the International Criminal Court is now going to do something. I'm asking the question, if the United States and if our esteemed leaders, Biden and now the vice president, they're all saying, we stand with the Armenian people on this day of the genocide. If they're saying that they are for the leaders of the democratic world, of human rights, and you continue the list of liberal values, my question is to Mr. Blinken, is the United States impotent to make sure that the verdict of the International Court of Justice, the UN, the highest tribunal of UN, there is a verdict to make sure that it's implemented? Of course he has the instruments. Of course the United States has instruments. It's using those instruments on Iran. It's using those instruments on Russia. I'm not discussing now whether rightfully or not.
They are used selectively.
It has the instruments, and it is not using in this case. Mm-hmm. If it's not using it, the question should be, why not? And the answer is obvious to me, because it has different interests. It has different interests. And Aliyev is playing with those interests because he is trained and his advisors from the West, from Israel and others, they're all in the realist paradigm. And in the realist paradigm, you have to work with the interests of various players, not with declarative values. Because when push comes to shove, they're going to act on their interests, not on values. And in the existential fight that Russia is in right now with the West, they're going to do everything to protect their interests. If it's going to be at our expense, at the expense of the Armenian interest, they will do it at the Armenian expense of the Armenian interest. This is a very brutal reality that we live in. Okay? It doesn't mean that we cannot do anything in this. It's not kind of this deterministic view, or what can we do, or fatalistic, what can we do? We are too small and whatnot. We are not. And I would go back to what Asbed was saying. We have, as a nation, potential and resource that could be used to work more actively with Mr. Blinken, Mr. Lavrov, the French, the Europeans, and who not. We have that. We're not using it. Why we're not using it? Because we have inept leadership that has already decided what's good for them and therefore should be good for all Armenians. And that's the paradigmatic shift. For Armenia to survive, we need to give up on Artsakh. For Armenia to survive, it's okay if Azerbaijan is taking more of Armenia proper territory, right? For Armenia to survive, we have to renege. We have to say that Turkey, it's going to be just symbolic memory of the genocide. No political, no legal consequences for you. They're ready to do all of that because that's how they're going to stay in power. And the price is going to be paid by the nation. It won't come immediately because right now, it looks like if an outsider comes to Yerevan, it's a bustling city. I mean, all cafes open, people are enjoying the life. It's a great place. Like probably was in no time in the recent Armenian history. There is more money coming to Armenia these days than ever. Where it's coming from? It's the Russians. It's the Russians. And it's their flight of capital now that goes to Armenia. We're talking about billions of dollars that coming with them to Armenia. And that money gives them blinds their perspective on what's happening. I think that this is going to continue that way. That finally we have reached the level of peace and prosperity is near to. But that's an illusion. That's an illusion. Because that money that is coming to Armenia is not due to Armenia's economic achievements. No. It's easy come, easy go. It came today, it will go back or go somewhere else tomorrow. But right now, because of the war in Ukraine, lots of Russians are moving their capital to Armenia. There are many reasons why that is happening, but that's how it is. So there is.
We definitely.
The country is awash with money, right? More money comes to Armenia now than to Belgium.
So as we said, this move by Azerbaijan was not a surprise, certainly not to you, certainly not to us. But just so we didn't have any doubts which way the Armenian authorities think, even in the week, Pashinyan produced many shocking headlines in the Armenian parliament. By the way, this was the same parliament session where the opposition parliamentarians were forcefully expelled from the parliament by the National Security Service employees in cooperation with Pashinyan's bodyguards. But that's beside the point. In a multi-day parliament session where Pashinyan was giving a report about the government's 2022 program, Pashinyan made official statements explicitly recognizing Azerbaijan's Soviet borders, which many analysts would say would imply that Artsakh is recognized as part of Azerbaijan. And this is the same guy who in 2018, or was it 2019, was saying that Artsakh is Armenia and that's that. Who are these latest statements by Pashinyan intended for? The Armenian public, Aliyev, others?
Well, I guess the multiple audiences, obviously. I think he's getting bolder and bolder in stating what must have been obvious to everyone, that he would accept the Soviet Republican borders. He's been saying that for some time now. I mean, he needs to sell that to the Armenian population. And he's getting bolder and bolder because there is no external threat to him. Russians need him for different reasons. Europeans and Americans need him. Everybody needs him because he's doing what is right for them. Not always for the Russians, but by and large, it's okay. It's acceptable for them too. So internally, nothing threatens him. He beefed up the police. All the villagers who dreamed of coming to the city and getting a job here, it's a dream come true. They are now policemen. There was not much to do on that land anyway, but now you have a decent job, a well-paid by Armenian standard job, and you are in Yerevan. Okay, so nothing threatens him, his power, and the more confident he feels about kind of controlling those threats, the more we see him getting aggressive in posturing, and aggressive in terms of this is the right thing, and I'm going to stand by it. And what is the right thing? When he says it's the border of the Soviet Union, it doesn't mean that Aliyev agrees with that, right? You are talking about peace deal, and in parallel, there is the process of delimitation. Demarcation comes after. And Aliyev is taking the advantage of it, and he's taking more and more, as much as he can, right? And it's not just Tergu, it's not just Kapan. Everywhere along that border, he will be taking the important heights, water, whatever he can get in control, he will be getting. And then when Pashinyan sits down, or whoever he signs sits down and says, okay, here is the Moscow provided the general staff maps of the Soviet Union, and here is where the border should be. Aliyev will say, no, the border is where we stand. And no international community, not even Russians, will push them out. And by controlling those heights, he prepositions himself, Aliyev, for the eventual possible military action, if necessary. If you Armenians are not going to do what I demand, and that is the corridor to Nakhichevan, then I will do that by force. He cannot do that right now, but he's working on being well prepared for that eventuality. If it comes to that point, they're better positioned. They control all the heights. The Armenian side will be much worse militarily, kind of defending itself against Azeris. That's what is happening. So when Pashinyan says that he's ready to sign, he should think, or we should think rather, or what happened to the documents that he signed in 2020? Right? Were they really implemented? Did Azerbaijan really stand by its obligations and commitments in that agreement? No, of course not.
Almost nothing was implemented from Azerbaijan, as far as I know.
Now, as a negotiator, now I'm asking a question. Even if you are negotiating with your neighbor, you agree on something, and he or she doesn't do what you agreed on. You may even have a contract signed, right? And he or she is done. Well, of course, you can go to police. In our case, that police is nowhere to be seen. Non-existent, because the international relations are anarchic, and anarchic means that the enforcement often is impossible, right? So who's going to enforce it? But are you going to, if he or she violates the agreement, are you going to go and make a new agreement about something? Of course not. Of course not. If the person is not doing what he or she agreed committed to do. Why would I go and make a new agreement, even more kind of lavish agreement? It's about peace and whatnot.
Right.
Obviously, the other side is not going to do that if whatever is not in their interest. And that peace paper, or paper on which you sign that peace, is nothing. It's nothing. Historically, I mean, look back. I mean, we can bring thousands of examples on when these peace agreements were signed by sides and violated them.
When Pashinyan was asked whether he recognized Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan, he didn't give a direct answer, but as is customary, he just blamed the former leadership of Armenia, saying that the former leaders of Armenia already recognized Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan by agreeing to the Madrid Principles. He explained this by the existence of the principles of territorial integrity as one of the three principles in the document, the other two being the non-use of force and self-determination. Pashinyan also said that if he's guilty of anything, it's that he hasn't been honest with the Armenian people, that the game is over, in his words. Game is over. This drew a rare rebuke from Vartan Oskanian, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs during Robert Kocharian. Can you explain how much credence we can give to any of these Pashinyan arguments that Armenia had agreed to Artsakh as being part of Azerbaijan within the context of the Madrid Principles?
Well, Pashinyan is very good at sophistry and casuistics, but in this particular case, he doesn't really have any ground to stand on.
Right.
I mean, it's his interpretation of the Madrid Principles. Even Aliyev was not interpreting the Madrid Principles the way he does.
Yeah.
Even
Right.
Aliyev has the educational background in international relations. Even he was not interpreting it the way Pashinyan does. Okay, the question is, why is he doing that? Because it's the galore of blame game. In Armenia, he has to do everything to say, I had nothing to do with that. It's already was predetermined. I only came, or as they common in Armenia in a kind of street language, they put it in my pocket, right? So the previous regimes, they did it already. It was predetermined, and they put it in his pocket, and now he takes it out of his pocket and says, gosh, it's over. What shall I do now? It's nonsense. It's nonsense because he was a member of the Armenian parliament. He could read the Madrid Principles then. It's not like, he came to power and all of a sudden they're telling him this is the Madrid Principles. No.
In fact, Vartan Oskanian said that not once did Pashinyan call him or ask him what the context of the Madrid Principles were. He just basically said they never talked to him or anyone.
Of course not. Not to him, not to Nalbandian. They were arrogant. They came to power and he was saying, I'm going to negotiate from my point. All that was done by these guys is irrelevant. I'm going to negotiate from my point. This is the arrogance of semi-educated, very poorly educated in international relations, uneducated person who arrogantly believed that he knows how he's going to handle it. And for some time, he believed that he was getting there, right? And that explains why at some point he was saying Artsakh is Armenian, period. Apart from him being opportunistic, right? He's in Artsakh, he says that, okay. Apart from being opportunistic, I think up until September 2020, he believed that he was playing the game right. He was playing the game right.
Yeah.
But he, being again a very poor negotiator, uneducated in international relations, he screwed it up. He was making moves, and he now it can be ascertained because he's saying that himself. He was making the moves in negotiations that made the war possible. The previous regimes, negotiating the Madrid Principles or whatever, were able to deter the other side. Would they have been able to deter Aliyev in 2020? Most likely, because what he did, what Pashinyan did, the major achievement out of 2016 was not just showing Aliyev how a war could end for him, right? 4 days, and he could see that Armenians were ready to go into a counteroffensive, and it was deadly for him. That's why Moscow stopped that. Okay, so right. But the main achievement was that the mediators had agreed in Vienna and then in St. Petersburg that there should be monitoring mechanisms, that they should monitor, and it was putting even more pressure on Aliyev now. And Pashinyan came, he scraped all of that. He didn't need that. He didn't need that. Why? Why? Because, again, as I said, I mean, we are dealing with a very arrogant and uneducated person.
Arthur, before we close this topic of Pashinyan's speeches in Parliament, is there anything else that caught your attention that you wanted to sort of bring up specifically from his speeches in the Parliament this last week?
Well, well, for me, he didn't say anything new. He's just getting bolder in uncovering his stance.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing new. I mean, if you were following him, even before he came to power, that's why I had all sorts of premonitions about this man in 2018, and some were criticizing me. Okay, in the euphoria and jubilation of this Velvet Revolution, you all of a sudden kind of skeptical about Pashinyan. I was skeptical about him because I followed as much as I could what he was writing in his newspaper in the years before. And he's now essentially doing what he was saying then. So we shouldn't be surprised if tomorrow he says that to make the peace with the Turkish people and to finally live in a happy family in this region, we need to take down the some of our memories of the genocide. Yes, symbolically we can pay tribute, but not anything. In schools, we do not really teach that stuff. In schools, we do not need to teach our children about the past in those terms. No hatred of Turks, please. And the issue is not about hatred of Turks. I do not hate Turks. But as Bernhard Schlink, one of the German thinkers, modern thinkers about the responsibility, collective responsibility of Germans has put it, the principle is very clean. Are the Germans today responsible for what happened under Nazis? His answer is the one that we should be using too. If they are denying the crime against humanity perpetrated by Nazis, they are guilty as the Nazis. Are the Turks who denying it guilty? Yes, according to Schlink. Yes, according to me. No, according to Pashinyan. Because for Pashinyan, economic gains are more important. He thinks that all Armenians are soulless, no ideals, no values, just material, just the well-being. And if he can feed them well, they will say, whatever. We don't need a nation state. This will be territory, just like Batumi is now territory.
And in what appears to be an act of coordinated timing, or a very big coincidence, actually, I would say, coordinated timing, because, every time that Pashinyan has made these very noisy statements, it has been followed up by Aliyev on the same day. So Aliyev followed up his latest statement too with his own, and he was not as conciliatory as Pashinyan. First, to the government of Artsakh, Aliyev said that Armenians of Artsakh should either adopt Azerbaijani citizenship or leave, as you were talking about earlier. And this was in response to the offer of Artsakh governments to meet in order to negotiate important issues, without explicitly agreeing to Azerbaijan's demands for talks on integration. If our listeners remember, there were these several instances in the past where
Aliyev said, come to Baku and negotiate about how you're going to integrate into Azerbaijan. And Artsakh authorities refused and said that our agenda does not include integration, but we'll negotiate on other things. And basically, by doing this, Aliyev is basically saying that, forget it, I'm not interested in negotiation anymore. You will either adopt Azerbaijani citizenship or else. And next, as if playing a game with Pashinyan, Aliyev said that in Prague in 2022, Armenia finally agreed to the so-called territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, but Pashinyan needs to do more. Aliyev said that since Pashinyan once said that Artsakh is Armenia, he should also now explicitly say Karabakh is Azerbaijan. So he wants Pashinyan to be even more bolder than he has been so far. So my question is, it is clear that Armenia has left Artsakh alone in this fight, at least on the government level. I'm not talking about the individual, people and diaspora and so forth. But from a negotiations perspective, what can Artsakh authorities do with these facts on the ground? Can they rely on Armenians in Armenia, outside of the government, or Armenians in the diaspora for support without coordinating with Pashinyan? And what could that support be? What benefit can they derive from the wider Armenian nation, given that Pashinyan is basically leaving them out to dry?
They are in very difficult circumstances, and I've been saying that in some ways these are worse than 1988, 1989. Things got worse with the war open war between Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Artsakh in 1990, 91. But before that, the situation, if you're comparing it, it's even worse than where the conflict started or rekindled in 1988 and 99. Is it possible to negotiate? Of course not. Because for Aliyev, the only negotiation agenda is reintegration. For the Armenian side, the agenda for negotiations is almost anything but reintegration. Normally, if the sides are getting into that kind of a stance, and if they have the goodwill, they are decoupling. Decoupling in negotiations means that, okay, we cannot discuss the status now. Let's talk about other areas where we have common interests. Aliyev doesn't see any common interests. He has now all the levers in his hands. He can put pressure from here, from there, from where he wants. And he also works on dividing or fragmenting the Artsakh community, hoping that he will be getting more voices from Artsakh Armenians who will be saying, okay, what can we do? Let's accept what Aliyev is demanding. That's his hope. That's what he's hoping to achieve. Now, what should the Armenians do in Artsakh? Theoretically, there are, if you cannot negotiate to satisfy your needs and interests, there are kind of option that is left on the table is self-help. And self-help may include even rebellion. Why they are not doing that? Because there are the Russian peacekeepers, and they don't want to probably to burn the bridges with the Russians, right? I mean, an open rebellion would mean that the peacekeepers too could be targeted or should be targeted.
Right.
Right.
So what the Armenians need to do is, instead of when we say negotiation, it doesn't mean that you have to negotiate with the other side only. You need to negotiate with other players. These are the moves beyond the table of negotiations. So you're negotiating with others. You're building a coalition to bring the pressure on the other side, to bring that other side to the negotiation table on your agenda, which is the humanitarian, as was indicated in that statement. Okay, we're ready to negotiate, but it should be on the humanitarian security issues, not on reintegration. Can they do that? Can Artsakh Armenians or their foreign affairs ministry or the leadership do that? No, alone they cannot do that. They can do that only with the Armenians as a whole nation, Armenians with diasporans. And therefore, they should stop relying on Pashinyan. Although Pashinyan has also a very important pressure point on them. That's the money.
Right.
If they're not making the moves that he likes, they're getting strong indications and hints that the money supply may stop. And in that way, that's why it's worse than 1988. Because in 1988, Artsakh Armenians had the full support of Armenia.
Mm-hmm.
So what should they do? I mean, if I were them, I'd be negotiating with Armenians worldwide. And they need a strategy how to, what is it that they are asking the Armenians in diaspora to do? Not just the words of condemnation, not just the words, actions.
But Arthur, just, to put the question, what can the diaspora do at a time when, for example, any kind of support for Artsakh would have to go through Armenia? And if Armenia is unwilling to provide that support?
Well, when I say support, I do not necessarily mean the delivery of humanitarian aid and logistics and whatnot, right? Logistics, by the way, were bad in 1992, in 91 too. That issue aside, what I'm saying is Mr. Blinken, President Macron, Biden, Lavrov, they have to take action. And we need to ask them for action that they can take. Right? So if we go and ask for something that is not in their interest or really can damage their interest, they're not going to do that. You need to figure out maybe something small, but very important in this context that will be sending the right signal to Aliyev. That is not happening right now.
Right. That's not happening. And I fear that.
If you're asking me, what is it that we need to go and ask? What is it that should be done? Don't ask me that question because I don't have the full information right now. I'm not in the government. I'm not the one having the full information to say, here, this small thing will make a systemic change. Don't ask for the moon. Don't ask for the recognition of Artsakh. Don't ask even for sanctions against Azerbaijan. But ask for something, maybe small, something that they can do that will be helpful for Artsakh Armenians in this situation. And to say what exactly, I'm not the right person right now to answer that question because I'm not in the government. I don't know the full gamut of the information is not available to me. Right?
Okay.
But I can say this, it's not impossible to find that.
Yeah, and I believe that as well.
It's impossible to find that. They shouldn't be in the government.
What I wanted to mention, Arthur, is that when diasporan organizations, for example, the ANC goes and makes those small demands from let's say the American government, in my case, I'm in America here, obviously, they replied that is not what they're hearing from the Armenian government. And this is where, suddenly this whole, sometimes we think it's a Pavlomy thing that unity is the way that we are going to succeed. Well, this is how disunity really divides us and completely destroys us. It's a real thing when we say we have to be united, and we are completely divided in this.
Oh, I started from there. I said, the only resource that this nation has is the human capital. And if you are not using that resource, you are not going to be achieving those goals. It's
right.
simple. And the example that you are giving, it's obvious. It's a very old principle of dividing and ruling. Yes, I mean, they can always make references to Miss Makun's or to a conversation with Ararat Mirzoyan or Pashinyan himself and say, what you're asking to do is going to throw a monkey wrench into this excellent process of peace building that Pashinyan is engaged in. And yes, that's going to be their rhetoric, but it's possible also to do things to address that rhetoric if we know that's the rhetoric. That's what negotiators do, okay? And that requires strategy, that requires thinking and finding the ways. And diasporans cannot do it on their own. They need that mandate from Artsakh. But they're not getting even a clean mandate. So what shall we do? What shall we ask? Right. And therefore, they are improvising. They would go, NCA would go and say, we demand sanctions or stop funding Azerbaijan or do this and that. That's improvisation. In my book, they sit down and they say, so what can we ask? What shall we do? And that's what they come up with, and they go and ask. And I'm saying, no, you should be talking to Artsakh Armenians. You should have strategists who can think in systemic terms, right? It may be a small piece here, but it may produce, create a momentum and then change the entire system. Right. But where are these pieces, right? Do we know where systemically these pieces are? We don't. And therefore, we go in this traditional, foreign
haphazard way
stuff that, okay, condemnation, the international community, how do we make the international community more engaged? Nonsense. There is no international community to engage. As Kissinger was saying about European Union, give me the phone number. Who do I call? Guterres? Ask him why the verdict of his own International Court of Justice is not being implemented. What's the problem?
Okay, since we are running out of time, Arthur, I'm going to turn to our final topic. While the open war of words between Iran and Azerbaijan has been reduced slightly, the Azerbaijani embassy in Iran still continues to be closed, and so far we are not seeing signs that the tension will abate anytime soon. Instead, we are seeing further cooperation between Baku and Iran's enemies, such as the U.S. and Israel. Just today, like I said, we're recording on April 25, the U.S. announced a new set of sanctions against Iran in conjunction with the U.K. And last week, the foreign minister of Israel, Eli Cohen, was in Baku. That visit came in the wake of Azerbaijan opening its embassy in Israel. Public messaging underscored that Azerbaijan and Israel are strategic partners and that both countries see Iran as a threat. There were also reports of defense deals, specifically that Azerbaijan will be acquiring 2 satellites from Israel. How do you see the issue between Iran and Azerbaijan developing? And will it move to an open confrontation, in your opinion, or is there potential for managing these tensions here?
Well, I'm not in forecasting business, and I don't know what's and when it's going to happen. All I know is that Israel is in the lead in this process. They needed Azerbaijan because strategically they understood that to inoculate the threat from Iran, they need to surround it by their allies. So to put the pressure from outside Iran on Iran, right? Not directly from Israel, but from outside. This is not a new grand strategy. I mean, they had the same grand strategy vis-a-vis Arabs. You're surrounded by Arabs, you put pressure on Arabs from outside. Right? In very simple terms, I don't have time to go deeper into this. So in that sense, Azerbaijan was a great find for them because Azerbaijan has the irredentist sentiments. Azerbaijan is Shia, but is pro-Turkish, and therefore the Sunni influences are very strong. And by and large is atheist. It's not really deeply Shia, although I would not entirely dismiss the religion as a factor. There are communities that are deeply Shia and influenced by Iran. So gradually they were building their presence there. Gradually they were finding areas for common interest and cooperation. And if it started with oil and energy sector, then moved to agriculture, and then military cooperation, they also kept this support of the Azeri narrative about divided nation, right? It's a divided nation. So they are not talking about divided nation when it comes to Armenians and Artsakh, but all of a sudden, Azerbaijan is a divided nation. Okay, it's strategically in the interests of Israel, and it's in the interests of Azerbaijani government right now, because it gives them a lot of important ways to play both with the Americans and Europeans, and even with Russians, when it comes to dealing with Armenia and Artsakh.
Mm-hmm. It gives them an external enemy as well to unite them.
Right. So in some ways, it's false. It's based on false grounds, right? That proximity with Israel and whatnot. But they also use the presence of a community of Jews from Azerbaijan, Tats and others in Israel, to make that whole thing possible. And we are now seeing that it is possible. Will it bring to a war with Iran? It depends on so many other factors. And I think Netanyahu probably was ready at some point to initiate something, but he got this internal issue and an internal problem. And for Israeli strategic perspective, their problem is that Iran is not just Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas in Gaza. If they attack Iran, they know that retaliation is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Will they be able to neutralize all of the retaliation? You don't need to be a military man to understand that that's impossible. And if that's impossible, it means that there will be Israelis, Jews, dying in Israel as a result. How many? That's debatable, right? Depends on what military systems Iran has at its disposal, what it can use, how can it strike. But it's obvious to everybody, to Netanyahu and to others. Netanyahu is trying to sell it to Israelis that we need to pay this price. Okay, and for all solve the problem. The opposition says, and the opposition is not just the political opposition, the opposition to that says that we're not gonna get rid of Iran just by several strikes. We're not gonna do that. The voices from the opposition are saying, forget about that. Probably we need to hope for an implosion of Iran. An implosion of Iran is possible if we take certain issues, dividing issues in Iran, and continue to heat it up, right?
Right.
Just like it was with that woman who died in custody, and then there was a whole campaign.
That's right. All the protests and things like that.
Another more important issue is the ethnic configuration of Iran, and it's not just Azeri Turks. They have Kurds, they have others. I'm not going to go into that. So work with those groups so that you can implode Iran rather than engage directly militarily with them. These two strategies, right? And I think the one that is about longer term and implosion is prevailing right now. Will those hawks who are saying, no, let's strike, just like we did in Iraq or Syria, prevail? I doubt, because everybody now understands that the retaliation is going to be significant. Yeah,
and the picture is very complicated. Even issues like the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We probably don't have time to go into all of those, but the interesting question for us, maybe, Arthur, would be, is there any way for Armenia to derive benefit from these situations, or at least stay safe from this ramping crisis between Iran and Azerbaijan?
I think it was Israeli Foreign Affairs Minister Asbed Bedrossian who said about Palestinians, they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. It applies now to
us.
If you don't know where you're going, what your goal is, or if your goal is very different, how are you gonna even gain, even if the opportunities, if the low-lying fruit is right there in your hands, you're not gonna be picking it because you do not see it as important for your strategy. And this is the problem. I mean, let's start from the Armenian government or the Pashinyan clique's strategy. They do not see those things as opportunities. Mm-hmm. They do what is opportunistically in the interest of them staying in power. They're not thinking about consequences. They're not thinking about several moves ahead, right? The strategic goal, because the goal is just to stay in power. If it's important to be in a club that is against China for the moment, if they're going to get something for their power, they'd sign up to that. They wouldn't think, long term, what does it mean for the relations with China?
Right.
We now in that club kind of condemning China for excesses in Uyghuristan. Yeah. Are we gaining anything? Are you gaining anything? No. Why did they make that move? Because it was in the interest of the clique at the moment. It was not thought through several moves ahead. So, in other words, I mean, they are very ad hoc and opportunistic in a sense that right now, here, this is good for me, and I'm doing that. It's not deep strategy. It's not thinking a long-term or consequences for your interests and none. And they define the national interest now. They redefine. They are reformatting what is the identity, what is the nation, and therefore what are the national interests. The national interests are to stay out of any inflaming developments in the region. Okay, we are a small nation. Leave us alone. We don't want anything. We just want to trade. We just want to do this. This is their message. And when you do that, you become not a player in the game. You are being played in that game. And that's what we are.
A vassal state. All right. We're out of time almost. So let's wrap up our topics here. I'd like to ask each of you if there's been something on your mind this past week that you would like to share. Arthur, anything?
Well, this week was obviously, I mean, it was yesterday, April 24th, as always. And I start from that point. Our collective memory is the key cornerstone of our identity. I am Armenian because, in part, I didn't assimilate fully. Grown in Georgia, educated in Russia, live in the United States, and here. I didn't because that collective memory was passed to me, and it was triggering everything else, interest in culture, language, and whatnot. Otherwise, I could have easily lost my identity. Now, if Pashinyan and his clique are trying to take that out from the foundation of that collective memory, or rewriting that collective memory, I have some bad news for them. It's not going to happen. It's a mission impossible. They may find some people who are going to be aligning with that line of Pashinyan, but I don't think for the majority of Armenians, it's not going to be possible for me. What it can do, though, and that's the bad news for our nation, it can further divide the nation, and it may make even less attractive for many Armenians, young Armenians in diaspora, to keep that identity.
Yeah.
To keep that identity, because in rational terms, eventually you have to answer the question. So why should I spend my time studying Armenian if I'm living in Russia, France, or wherever, United States, right? Why should I be doing that? Because my identity is important. And what is in that identity? Just the cultural stuff? Is it what is it that keeps us Armenian?
Why are we staying Armenians?
One of the things is the collective memory. Yes, and it's traumatic collective memory. And they're asking us, turn the page, forget about that past. Think about future. Let's move to that bright future, prosperous future. That's what they're saying. But can someone take out what is the cornerstone of his or her identity? I think not. I think not.
Thank you. Hovik, any thoughts you would like to share?
So last week, media asked Pashinyan about the statement from the Catholicos of all Armenians calling for Pashinyan's resignation, and which was done, according to the Catholicos, as an act of fatherly advice. And Pashinyan's response was that if the relationship between the church and government is not good, then the relationship between church and God is not good, making reference to one of the biblical chapters, I believe Romans chapter 13.
So again, he turned to the Nachkins, you're saying.
Yes, perhaps even the most Nachkin of Nachkins, God himself, forgive me, Lord. But in any case, notwithstanding the fact that whether it's a good idea or not to attack and try to discredit another institution that has been around for 2,000 years and has kept Armenians as Armenians, even in the absence of government. Another interesting response was from the first president of Armenia, Madrid Bedrossian, who basically said that if you're making a claim like that, then you have to actually be a king, and you have had to be divinely ordained and sworn in by the Catholicos himself. So has Pashinyan done that? Anyway, pretty interesting exchange, but it just serves to underscore that no institution will be spared if it goes against Pashinyan. And that's my rant. Asbed, you always ask us for rants, but you never provide your own. So I'm going to take the liberty and ask you for final words as we close the show.
I was actually thinking whether I should have talked about why I have April 24, 1915 as my birthday on social media. In fact, I have a reminder to tell me that I should stop people's ability to wish me happy birthday on my wall. So I do that. I did that for the month of April. It'll remind me to open it back for people to say something if they want in May. And people come back in text this time. They start wishing me. I have about 20 or so texts. I guess it's better than 100 people writing on my wall. But, it's exactly what Arthur said. It's because it is as a diasporan, it is the establishment of my own identity on that day, essentially. Anyway, in many cases, I tell people I'm looking pretty good for a 108-year-old guy. All right. We're going to leave it there for today. Thank you, Arthur, for joining us today.
Good luck. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. That's our show. We hope you found our weekend review helpful. We invite your feedback and your suggestions. You can find us on most social media and podcast platforms. The links are in our show notes. Talk to you next week.